Today, I'm really excited to have Utkarsh Sengar on the podcast. Utkarsh is currently the Director of Engineering for WebFlow's growth and ecosystem teams. He first started his career as a software engineer at eBay, working on the fraud and relevancy teams. He was then promoted to a senior software engineer, working on eBay's innovation and new ventures programs before leaving for OpenTable. At OpenTable, he was a software engineer for the data science and analytics team. He then joined Upwork as a senior software engineer for their enterprise platform team, and then later transitioned into their growth team. From there, he became the director of engineering for growth at Upwork. After Upwork, he took his talents to WebFlow. Outside of these positions, Utkarsh is also a technical advisor for various startups and a scout for Cowboy Ventures. It was really great having Utkarsh on the podcast as he is one of the greatest growth minds we have in the industry. And it was really great to talk to him about why certain companies saw the growth that they did in the last 10 years and became industry defining products, and what companies can do in the next 10 years to also see that type of growth. So, with that said, I hope you enjoy the podcast. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Building Blocks podcast. I'm super excited to have Utkarsh today on the podcast, and yeah, thank you so much for coming on.
Of course, super excited to be here, Devik.
Awesome. Awesome. Well,
Yeah, of
before we dive into your experiences and especially Webflow, I wanted to start from the beginning, right, and talk about your story first. So, what
course.
brought you to the world of technology and product building?
Yeah. I mean, so I was like a quick background about me. I was born and brought up in India. The I think the internet hit me sometime in my high school, 2002 or something. So that's when the first time I got exposed to the internet, and I was like, like every kid back then, it was fascinating. You would have
Yeah.
Yahoo and like all that like fun stuff around. That excited me about technology in general. I mean, I got into like basic website building, simple stuff like CSS, HTML, some PHP, uh, FTPing your way into like launching your website. Um, yeah, easy times.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was the first time I would say I touched it, and since then I just kept uh, I was just hooked to it. Like like when I got into my undergrad, I used to run a website called Knowledge Bin. It gave me like decent like student income, like for a kid growing up in India. It was decent money from
Right.
Google Ads back then. So yeah, that just kept me also hooked because it was a good way to just maybe spend on like on your restaurants on, over
Right.
the weekends. So yeah, that kept me hooked. And like then like just I just got into computer science in school. That just made me more interested in this area. And yeah, here I am. Just kept on tinkering since then.
No, I mean, I think even nowadays, I know everything's become a lot simpler, like hosting your website, building your own website, but I still, there's still some complexity there. So,
Oh,
even like the last week, I spent a long time just trying to host my website on AWS, and I was going through some issues with like DNS routing and all of this type of stuff, and I was just thinking about it exactly the same thing, that this is still with like today's state where everything is still simplified and it's easy to host. I can't imagine what building back then must have been like.
oh yeah. I mean, I actually feel that was like like you can essentially the thing was like there are no abstractions in between. It was like you have a file, you put it on on a web server. The web server is configured for you if you're using some shared hosting reseller, and you're done.
Right.
Like you don't have to do much. Now I think it depends. Like what does easy mean for you? Some people I know are still pretty hardcore. They spin up their own web servers in Amazon, and they think like they say it's easy for them. For me, like my definition of easy now is if I want to build a static site, I just spin up a Webflow page. It's
Oh
just
yeah.
way more simpler. But if I do something like more complicated, like hosting a complex web application, my go-to has been Heroku in the past. Now I'm more
Mhm.
going to like Vercel kind of solutions. But yeah, like easy is so subjective now, depending on the person's comfort level with the technology.
For sure, yeah, and I mean, I think as more no code builders come, and just easier hosting of cloud instances, we're gonna see that become more simpler and simpler. But even in the current state, right, it can get complex. So that's
Exactly.
super interesting. And so you grew up in India, you're tinkering around, you went into computer science, and I think what's really interesting, and I've noticed this, my time being post graduation, is that there's a lot of different avenues you can take. especially in the realm of computer science and in general. There's so many opportunity in tech, so many big tech giants. So how have you decided on what to pursue next and what opportunities to take a part of?
Yeah, that's such a hard question. I mean, so many people have asked me this question over time, especially folks who are in their undergrads, in their high schools, and they are thinking what's next. I mean, look, like there are maybe two ways of looking at this. One is the logical way, the pragmatic way, which is like what pays your bills is is a good path to
Yeah,
excel in. Like financially, you don't have to think too much about am I going to get a job after my education. So I
yeah,
think that's a very important factor to keep in mind. To me, like, like I feel I'm a pragmatic person where I did think about that, which is like what kind of areas can just help me uh, uh, feel financially successful.
mhm,
um, and to me, like, maybe it changes few years from now, I don't know, but at least back then and even right now, I think it's still fairly rewarding career to be in
yeah,
technology, because essentially your leverage is so high. Yeah, like you can write code, you can build something.
yeah,
And like, yeah, so the leverage is much higher in building software. So that's the pragmatic thing, I would say. The other side, which is, I would say, more emotional and more personal thing, which is what excites you. Now that is subjective, like, and some people might say, I don't know, like, whatever excites me, whatever helps me make money, and that's a fair thing to say too. But for me, what excited me, at least, and even like till date, what excites me is the idea of building something which people can use. Now, when I say building, does not mean software building. It can be,
right,
like, build out. Like, I was in a pottery class with my wife recently, and it was amazing. Like, I could actually build up like a real thing which we use every day now. It's amazing. So, like, to me, like,
right,
I have always been a builder. It has excited me all the like for a long time. And I felt like every time I felt like I don't want to do that, like, I explored at one point I should do an MBA maybe and just do something else with my career.
right.
But it was just never something which I could convince myself to do, because the building nature comes in.
No, that makes a lot of sense, and I think I started to notice this too, where I think especially early on, you chase, the biggest check, and that's sort of what the driving passion is. But which is nothing's wrong with that, right? But I think at a certain point, especially in technology, you reach a point where those next job cycles or those next opportunities, the check size can change, but like you reach a point where the money isn't as important as much as the excitement of what you're building, and because
Yeah.
there's it's relatively almost the same. So yeah, it's always really interesting. I think that's sort of a luxury. A luxury a lot of people don't have. But I think in technology, a lot of people are able to do.
Oh, hell yeah. And like, that's what I tell everyone who, like, asks me for a suggestion of like what they should be exploring. I tell them, like, it's less about learning how to program.
Hmm.
Sure, like, that's the easy part. Like, you can spend, and like right now with AI, it has become even actually easier. Like, I use ChatGPT all the time when I'm writing code. That actually
Yeah.
is easier now. But the hard part is, like, having that knack of like, are you actually enjoying building something? And that to me is uh, what I think is rewarding and also
Hmm.
aligns with financial incentives.
Yeah, no, totally. And yeah, I think that's a good segue into your experience building at WebFlow.
Mhm.
And so for our, I'm sure a lot of people have heard of WebFlow. I'm very surprised nobody hasn't in the audience. But if you haven't, WebFlow is basically a no code builder. They're one of the leading no code builders out in the industry right now. And I think what's really interesting is that in general, right, building websites used to be inaccessible to people without a coding background. Where if you had a business major, for example, and you had no idea how to program, typically you'd have to just outsource that out to somebody else, and that's a whole process, or have to ramp up and learn how to code, which is a big hill to climb. But websites like Webflow, for example, have completely simplified it so they can just focus on really delivering whatever they want to on their website, and just get it hosted and all of that good stuff, without worrying about it.
Mhm.
And I think what's really interesting is that Webflow in particular, it wasn't necessarily the first to the market when it came to this. Like we had competitors like WordPress and Squarespace, that were already incumbents in the space when Webflow popped up, but they've still come and really taken over the market. And I think now they're the industry leader, from where I see. So, what do you think Webflow did really well to get itself to this point where they're able to come into the industry and really seize the market?
Yeah, such a fascinating question because I mean, I first came across Webflow when they got featured on Hacker News. Like, so they're a YC company. Yeah, they went into YC like I think 8 or 9 years ago,
Okay.
and that's when I, like, so for the first time saw them. I just like ignored them, like not happening. Like, I'm an engineer, I know, like there are certain things you can abstract away, the way maybe WordPress has done it, or even Wix and Squarespace have done it,
Right.
but you can't truly abstract the box model and like the nitty gritties of like how you write code in CSS. You can't really
Totally.
abstract that in no code view. Like, so I was like, sure, it's like yet another drag and drop page builder, not going to be more than that, nothing interesting, because I'm an engineer, I can write code, moving on. But they, and like this is the, like the uh, resilience, if you will, of
Hmm.
amazing founders was there. And like I think Vlad and the team just kept at it, of uh, not deviating from their vision of like, hey, we don't want to just be a website builder where you can drag and drop components and like make a page live. Their target persona was actually these like designers who are capable of thinking amazing, of thinking of amazing designs. They are somewhat technical, like they can use tools like back then Sketch or Adobe XD and now Figma. They are technical enough where they have the knack to like build something. They're not like small business owners, for example,
Hmm.
so they can invest their time and energy into exploring a tool which makes them more productive. And I think that's the target audience they went after. And I think that was one of the things which paid off. Like, they kept on executing against this primary persona and kept on building features, kept on building UI, like visual abstractions of these like primitives of HTML and CSS and even JavaScript with our interactions feature. And that was the, I think, like like from a team's perspective, that was the most important thing. Kept
Right.
on focusing on this persona, which was not a page builder like persona, but more of a sort of semi-technical person. And the second reason why they actually, I think, nailed the market is never trying to become like, hey, we are a catch-all page builder. Like, if you truly want, like, if you're a truly non-technical person and you want this drag and drop page builder and you can ship something within seconds, Webflow might not be for you. Like, Webflow has a learning curve. You have to figure out how to use the box model even in the visual way properly.
Right.
And I think that's what we're going to be focused on even over the next few years. So that's one. And the second part is just, like, like I know like it's a thing right now which is called community led growth, but I think Webflow was one of the first companies which pioneered the idea of like, how can you use your community to truly drive business value, but really you are just building for the community. That's what you're truly doing. And an outcome of that is, your business is also successful.
Right. And I think we've seen like other giants pop up by targeting the designer segment, like you mentioned. Like Canva is a great example of that as well, right? Where Canva
Yeah.
basically took all those different tools and put it all on the cloud, on available online, so you don't necessarily need to have this whole suite of products. So it's a really interesting segment actually that maybe I should do a deep dive on sometime, because that's very interesting, because Webflow and Canva are huge, and it's that segment as well. So
Totally.
definitely, that makes a lot of sense. Um, yeah, but I think another part with Webflow is that, like you mentioned this, it is definitely an investment still compared to other
Yeah.
website builders, but at the same time, it still simplifies the process of website building, where you don't have to get into the nitty gritty of code. And I think one of the really selling factors there, like you mentioned, is that unprecedented level of customization available in the platform that's typically reserved for code. But it's a very hard balance, where how do you retain simplicity while also having customization, because you don't want it to get as complex as building code would be. At that point, you're losing the essence of the platform. So how do you think Webflow has gone in terms of retaining simplicity while allowing for true customization like you guys have?
Oh my god, that's yeah. Let me think about that. It's I'll tell you. I mean, it's not easy. I'll be honest with you. Like, like there is, of course, there is a baseline set, which was essentially again going back to the founders, like just the iterative nature of building Webflow as a product. Um, is like essentially that, like that baseline was set. But I think after that, like once we have a product which works, a lot of that has to just do with look at what engineers are doing or like what people writing code are doing to like build a functionality now, and then look at like how do you mentally visualize that. Like for example, I'll give you an example, like the box model. So the
Mhm.
box model, like has like, like you can have like a div, and then you will have like a padding or a margin around that. That concept you can visualize in your head, like visually you can think about it.
Right.
So what we try to do is, like, whatever is our visual mental model of the box model, we try to replicate that in the UI. And that translation is of course not going to be precise in the first pass.
Right.
uh, and that's where we like tinker a lot. Like we have a small group of creators who work very closely with to get their feedback early on, and it's a lot of really fast rapid iteration. Start from a baseline about what that like visual mental model looks like, and then just talk to your customers. Like, these are our vocal customers who care a lot about this, and we just keep on iterating. And
Mhm.
everything we launch has this, like, like, it's not magic. Basically, it's something where we have like a release a flow on these features, where
Right.
we have this like like what we call alpha, which is like internally all the employees use these functionalities and give active feedback. Things change meaningfully in the alpha when we start getting actual feedback. Then we have this private beta where we open it up to some select customers who are like passionate, give us unfiltered feedback. Then we move on to beta, and then like finally GA. So there's a whole process of tinkering with these like minutia of like features. And like, as like one of the recent features we launched is called quick stack, which is like, it's nothing but just some like UI affordances on top of the HTML grid. Nothing fancy, if you ask me. And as an engineer, like, it's something fairly simple. You can just add it, like just a bunch of divs and spans, and then you are done. But making it in Webflow meant like trying to figure out what kind of UI should we show to that no code builder who's mentally thinking about maybe merging these two cells in the UI, but
Yeah.
we don't know that. So like on hover, show like a merge button, which is like sort of this icon which helps them, like, okay, this does this. Those things are not obvious, and you can't dream up of these solutions. It's just more like observing the users, talking to them, trying to figure out what you're trying to do here again, and
Mhm.
then just doing that over and over again until you figure out this is what is working.
Yeah, and I think now you're mentioning it. I think one of the really nice benefits that a company like Webflow has is that internally your own users are actually using your product. Because typically what happens, like a lot of B2B SaaS, for example, you don't have that because you have to actually get it to the customer's hands to get that feedback. But that's great because you have obviously a super passionate group, but they're actually using the product as well. So I think
Yeah.
that's awesome for feedback.
So that's actually a great point you mentioned, like using your own product. I think one of the biggest reasons why I'm here at Webflow
Mhm.
is, like, I have been a long sort of a user. I wouldn't say I'm a pro Webflow designer. Like, there are people doing phenomenal stuff on Webflow. I'm nowhere near that, but I have been a long user. Like any sites, uh, projects I build, the landing pages are Webflow based. And in my last job, when I was leading the growth and some marketing platform teams at Upwork, that was one of my first exposure to Webflow as an enterprise customer, where
Mhm.
uh, I mean, I was exposed to Webflow for a while, and I was like, we had this like WordPress setup, which was extremely painful for us to maintain. It was a security nightmare by our security teams, and I had to like have like 3 or 4 engineers always working on some improvement of the core CMS capability, or like some landing pages or some new UI component which had to be built. So I sort of like worked with a couple of my colleagues there and like just pushed to get Webflow set up.
Right.
And our lives changed, to be honest with you. Like, we were able to reallocate those 4 or 5 engineers on something more meaningful, which they were actually happy building, not just building landing pages over and over again, which was a good change for them.
Right.
And from just being like trying to be just catching up to what like marketing teams were asking us to do, we were like on top of every single request because of Airflow. Now, coming back to the point about using your own product, that's when I realized that like Webflow is not just like this like web page no code builder thingy, but it actually has like meaningful implications on
Yep.
marketing teams, larger companies, and it actually net you are saving way more money than actually spending on Webflow. So, and that has been my pattern now. Like, like work on a product which I understand well. I use it at least on a monthly or a bi-weekly basis, and I feel like that is a good pattern for me to just make sure I'm also passionate and I show up every day to something which I, like I want to do.
Yeah, no, I think I can't stop smiling because as you know, as someone who's trying to do their own startup, this is like I think for every startup founder, the moment your customer becomes your biggest advocate,
Yeah,
that's the like you've reached this beautiful point, right? And so it's really awesome to hear how you got exposed to Webflow, that it helped your situation so much to the point you realize that hey, this is a mission that I want to join, and I think that this product is actually going to change lives.
yeah.
And I can only imagine what the founders must have felt like at the time. But that's awesome, man. That's really cool to hear.
Yeah, totally. I mean, yeah, like Webflow, and even like before Webflow, like when I was working at Upwork, I had sort of a similar kind of pattern, which is uh, like I used to use Upwork a lot when like I was like working on a couple of side projects with a friend of mine, and we wanted some help with some like Zen card thing, and I had like not going to spend more time on writing PHP code, so we just hired somebody. That person was phenomenal. So yeah, same. Like like I use Upwork every now and then, and like I feel like I understood the customer so well. I was like, okay, I'm gonna fix a bunch of things here which I feel is broken, and I feel the same now.
Yeah, no, makes a
Yeah,
lot of sense, and it comes back to that excitement point we were talking about earlier.
exactly.
But I think what's really interesting there is that you mentioned we talked a little bit about the platform, some new features coming
Mm,
out. And I think you know you know the platform needs to determine how much of the code functionality they want to replicate in a no code platform, right? Because you can start replicating a lot of stuff. You can start bringing open source packages if you wanted to. Like there's a lot of stuff you can start bringing in to no code. So at a certain point you got to draw the line though, because it just become easier to code. So how do you like when you think about it like that, where do you think Webflow draws the line there? Like how
yeah.
do you know what to bring into no code or what to keep into code?
Yeah, great question, because it's it is subjective. So the way, so I'll give an overview of like how we think about this,
Hmm.
and then maybe it will answer your question. But I mean, yeah, give it my best shot, which is a Webflow's core competency is like we have an amazing product called the Designer, which is like the Webflow's page builder product, where essentially is like you can build the whole like web page document um, in that flow. Now there are things like third party integrations you would want to do. As a
Hmm.
business owner, you want to do HubSpot integration, or you want to do some kind of fancy Calendly integration, or even some more advanced booking systems, which is not possible just in a simple web page, which is just HTML, CSS, and some JavaScript for animation purposes, nothing more than that.
Right.
Um, we do have this idea of a CMS, which is a simple database which helps you essentially do a read-only action and like show something in the UI. That's like as simple as that. But like the moment you think about some level of like dynamic capabilities, that's something which like Webflow does not support. Maybe it will one day, but our strategy on that has been uh, um, our ecosystem. Like we have um, a huge community of really engaged designers, no code builders, and engineers. Like there are engineers who are excited about our platform. They write code to
Right.
extend the Webflow platform in extremely creative ways. So what we did, and this was something which happened very recently, as soon as like last month, where we announced a completely revamped version of Webflow's apps. This is our ecosystem product, where we are providing our customers with two kinds of like abstractions on the product. So the first one is what we call designer extensions, where engineers can essentially build like these like custom interaction widgets on top of the designer. And so I'll give you an example. So let's say you are a person building a web page on Webflow, and you want to have like a bunch of forms added from HubSpot. Right now, without the Webflow apps product, what you have to do is go to HubSpot, copy some code snippet from HubSpot. You have to know some JavaScript, find the place where you can inject that JavaScript on Webflow, because Webflow is sort of a really a no like a low code product. You can still
Right.
add custom code where you want to, and then you have to like tinker around with like, okay, now how do I make this work properly in terms of styling? So there is some work for you where you have to write a code to make that happen. With apps, what we have done is we have a HubSpot app on the Webflow marketplace where you will see all the list of forms once you authenticate with HubSpot. You can just say, hey, I want to add this form to my Webflow website. You
Right.
click, the app gathers the styling done on that specific page. It pulls the form which you want to add, combines them together, injects it on that page. And like now we like without building that core capability of adding dynamic form functionality on the form, like super complex form functionality on the web page, we have now enabled you to start using HubSpot while also automating how to write some code on top of it too. So to summarize, like I think I would quote like one of our community members who said it perfectly, where the day we launched Webflow apps, uh, we overnight hired 1,000 engineers where who are contributing to our platform, helping our customers succeed, and in return, they will also be like succeeding in just building more demand for their products in turn.
No, totally. And I think that setting that foundation so people can build on top of it is so critical. And
Mhm.
we see that so many software products, how, they had a really great core product, but the moment they integrated a marketplace or allowed people to develop on top of that, a whole new scope of how far the product can go just got unveiled. And some of the examples I can think of is like Chrome extensions, for example. Chrome is a great product before they started the Chrome marketplace, but after, now there's million billion dollar companies that are just Chrome extensions. So it's
Exactly.
enabled a whole suite of products like that. Shopify has their marketplace as well, so they have that thing, their thing going on. So I think the moment you integrate a marketplace is just really awesome, because especially in the tech and the software community, people love building new ideas, and they can do it very quickly as long as you give them a proper foundation. So I'm very excited to see where Webflow goes.
Exactly. And then like just going back to your original question about like how does Webflow draw the line? Like that line is, like sort of not set in stone line, but it like we essentially focus on making our primary product, the designer, best in class. I would say there are
Mhm.
still room of improvement, like for us to there, like for us to make there. So make the designer the core abstractions of the main primitives of the web systems, like uh, yeah, like HTML, CS, and JavaScript, more accessible, more aware, um, and then the second aspect of that is just think about the primary customer who we are finding product market fit with, which is these
Mhm.
visual designers who learn and use our product and become our evangelists, and of course, customers who use Webflow the most, which is like these large companies, most likely their marketing teams. So focus on these two personas primarily and just build what they care about in terms of roles management, access management. Like there's a long tail of like enterprise functionality we also have to build to support them. But broadly, like that's our like guiding principle, which is
Right.
like focus on the core, address these core personalities needs, and then from there we have a long tail which we will address using our ecosystem product.
Right. That makes a lot of sense. And I think, as a general growth question, this is just going to more software growth. You've had a lot of experience as a lot of different companies. And so I think what's really interesting is how, traditionally businesses used to focus strictly on B2B or B2C. But nowadays, a lot of platforms like Webflow or other open source packages that, or a lot of open source technologies, are straddling the line where they're B2B and B2C. And I think it's a really interesting dynamic, but I think it's a big challenge there too. So, when you think about growing the business from a growth point of view, how do you ensure that the platform stays relevant to both sides there? Because every
Oh,
side obviously has their wants and needs, right?
yeah, it's intense. I mean,
I can imagine.
yeah, it's such a hard but a very important thing to do. And like it's like the way I rationalize this in my head is like the marketplaces have a good um, playbook to handle such situations. If you're a pure SaaS business, like where you don't really have much of like a flywheel of your supply base or like your SP base contributing meaningfully to your business, sure, like you can like not worry about that and just focus on like that one side or like a pure B2B play. But the moment you're thinking about like these two-sided product where there's one part of a product which is critical for your success. They care a lot about your product, and they are the ones why you are successful in the first place. Honestly, you can't just drop the ball there. Like you
Right.
have to support that community meaningfully, because that is what is helping you move forward and win. And then you have these these more business customers. To me, this is a marketplace kind of dynamic, really, which is how do you maintain supply and demand balanced out, um,
Mm-hmm.
which does not necessarily mean they're maybe interacting on your platform. Essentially, like the pure marketplaces like Upwork, Amazon, eBay, Instacart, or even Uber, like they are managed marketplaces. Like they essentially facilitate a transaction between s- supply and demand.
Right.
And for that, they have to just maintain the supply demand volume, just make sure they have the right categories in place and all that fun stuff they do just to make sure their marketplace is healthy. There's an amazing blog post on this about WTF is liquidity, to just understand and go deep into marketplace dynamics. But my learning on this is, while your product is not facilitating this like transaction between your supply and demand, you are still heavily dependent for your business's success to make sure both of these parties are successful in what they're doing.
Yeah.
And organizationally, what it means is you can't just say, hey, like we have this like supply base of what we call SPs, service providers, who are successful, so let's just let them be, they will succeed anyway, and let's just focus on one side. That's a failing move. um,
Right.
what again, this is not something which is like like a, again, a set in stone rule, but how I try to balance this out is, think about who are the users who are contributing to your product, which is in some functionality, some features we are building. SPs are important. Like these visual builders who learn our product are critical. So
Right.
sometimes we do focus on, let's improve this functionality for them, because they will succeed in what they're doing, and in turn they'll like bring us more business. And sometimes we say, okay, you know what, this makes more sense for us to focus on these businesses who need these like roles and permissions mapping systems so that they can succeed in their org, in turn, which helps these SPs because they get invited to that org, and they like like our top Webflow agencies get hired by these like top like Fortune 500 businesses to do work for them. So it helps them too in a way, but indirectly. So
Right.
to me, it is thinking it's more about how we directly benefit our um, service providers, or how do we indirectly benefit our service providers, is how I'm thinking about it. And like on a day-to-day basis, it's a prioritization call. I make mistakes, all of us make mistakes sometimes about like
Mm-hmm.
that this was a wrong call to make. But it's a balancing act. And companies like Uber or even Upwork, when I was there for like few years, it was a hard conversation. Like many times we had to deprioritize a certain functionality because you want to focus on the other persona, even when the teams are fully staffed. Yeah, like
Yeah.
even then you have to make hard decisions about moving from one to other. But what we never do is like stop investing in one side. it's
Right.
it's it's bad.
But I guess yeah, that's the thing. It's a very interesting problem there, and I think one of the things I think about is like especially right now with software becoming so saturated, right? There's so many different software coming out. Like, what is there any fear that another company could come in and dedicate all their resources to just one side of the market, and like try just seizing that side of the market? And if so, like, how do you address that? What is your thought process there on that?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, look, like there are always going to be competitors. Like there will be companies who come in and like as a company grows big, they do develop blind spots.
Yeah.
Like that happens. And for every large company's blind spots, like there is a startup like trying to capture that blind spot, and hopefully like and hoping to grow big from there.
Well,
But that's their
that's me right now.
exactly. So like that's their wedge, which is how like innovation happens. New companies get built, and
Hmm.
some succeeded there. Um, to us, like without throwing any other company under the bus here, like to us, it's more about, yes, they're targeting a specific area which maybe is weak on our side. Um, We keep a close eye on like what our competitors doing, and even who are like non-competitors. For example, I personally don't feel Wix is that close of a competitor to us. We don't
Hmm.
compete with Wix. So whatever Wix does, great, let them do it. Like, we have our target focus persona, which is we work for creators. We don't build tools for SMBs. So that's not something which concerns me too much when
Hmm.
some of those companies even try to target on certain personas. But let's say a company comes in which is, like truly doing and like focusing on our primary creators, we do take notice of what they do. We do try to learn from, like, what's making them tick. And I mean, look, like, we will fiercely compete
Yeah.
when it comes to somebody capturing our own primary persona, which we care a lot about. um, and we rectify our mistakes. Like, I think our like a lot of our marketplace's product line is due for an improvement, like a meaningful upgrade, and we are actively working on that. Like, the apps launch we did was just a first step towards that, and like for the rest of the year, a lot of cool updates are coming actually 2 weeks from now when we have the WebFlow conference, all that focused on just addressing our core personas needs and pain points.
Hmm.
uh, and yeah, like at the end of the day, all this is just, like, work, but the core is like, how well do you execute? Like, to me, the
Yeah.
engineer in me is like, as long as we have belief in ourselves that, hey, we are solid executors, we will nail anything with high precision, high speed. That's all matters to me. And
Right.
like, you do that enough, and like, you still keep winning. Sure, there'll be other startups who come in who maybe eat a part of your pie, but your pie becomes too so big that maybe it's okay to have somebody take a bit of your pie, as long as you are growing big enough.
For sure, yeah, and I think I think we start. I think the big companies who start to fail later on, they lose that core understanding of what their customer is like, and their customers' needs and behaviors.
There you go.
And I definitely think it's something that comes down the line, just naturally through leadership changes and stuff. But as long as you position yourself with really smart people who keep that customer persona and and understanding of the customer at the center, and are able to execute quickly to deliver value to them, you will stay competitive even when
So,
other
s-
players come in the space.
great call out there. And I think one of the things which I try to follow personally is, nothing against companies which are not founder led. They are phenomenal companies. Like, they're some of the best companies in the world are like non-founder led right now. But at an early stage, at least maybe Series B, C, even just going public or something. And I think at that stage, it's important for me. Like, if I want to work for another company in the future, it should be founder led. That
Hmm.
grounds you into like that primary customers like focus. And I think, like, there is something about their vision, even if they're wrong sometimes. I think that's okay. Like, everybody's wrong sometimes. Like, you're not, I don't know, like something, you're not Chat GPT maybe.
Yeah, you're not a robot. Yeah.
Or even it is wrong sometimes. So yeah, like, you can't be right all the time, and that's okay. But like, just having that like obsession about like, I have the skin in the game here, I'm not just paid for that, is something else, and I feel it
Hmm.
at Buffalo. um, and one of the things which just resonates with me all the time, is one of the reasons why I also ended up joining Webflow was, like, I was reading Vlad's uh, user manual, where, it's an internal document he shares with all the employees. And he one of the things where he mentions, like, Webflow is my life's work. So,
Hmm.
like, which is meaningful to me. Like, it just means that it's not just a company he's building and he'll move on to something else. Well, maybe everybody moves on one day, but sure, but like, that's not my place to
Yeah.
say. But at least he believes strongly that it is his life's work, which is a big deal for me, and it gives me motivation to, okay, I'm gonna be part of something what is a life's work. So that is a strong motivator to just focus and help the team just have that narrow focus on what truly matters.
Totally, yeah, and I think regardless, even if it's a small startup or a big, huge company, the moment we see a shift where the founder leaves or whatever happens, and a new person comes in, I think you just see a very clear shift in dynamic, the way the company operates. There's a lot of big players you can look at. I won't name them here, but you can just look at the industry and you can just see that shift. And I think the reason why is when you're a founder and you've taken the risk to build a company to where it is today, you're willing to take those next risks
Yeah.
and for the next part of where the company goes. And they may pay off or not, But that's why you'll see them those more janky shifts, I think, when you're founder level. While if you or somebody who just come in as a CEO, or it's been handed to you, you don't want to necessarily take those risks like that. And I think a good example of that I can talk about is Mark Zuckerberg is one of the last uh, legacy CEOs, I guess, in terms of for the social media generation.
Yeah.
And even now, like whether you agree with the metaverse or not, the fact that he's took such a big step into rebranding the company and shifting the whole direction, I don't think you're gonna see, or you haven't seen that really from any other big company do that who aren't founder led, especially. And a lot of it comes from that. So it's very interesting to at least be part of founder led companies because despite even if everything goes wrong or whatever happens, it's a lot more fun in my opinion because
Oh,
there's a lot more going on.
oh, totally. I mean, yeah, like it's like you do have to align with a founder's perspective towards things, and if you feel it's not aligned, or like you are in like disagreement, it might not be the best place for you. Because yeah, I think it's important to be like truly in lockstep with how your founding team thinks about your product.
For sure. And I think one interesting thing, we briefly touched on Chat GPT, but in general in the startup space, I've seen a lot of new AI startups pop up, and a lot of them have GPT as the foundation. So I think for those companies, the technology, unless they're a very deep AI company, isn't necessarily their moat. It's actually going to be their growth and their user acquisition that ends up differentiating and really coming up with winners in each respective space. So I was just wondering, like, a lot of them are at this point where they have the foundation and the product ready, but they're trying to acquire users and trying to grow as quickly as possible. So if you were in their position right now, given what what do you think they should think about when creating a growth strategy here and competing with other companies in the market?
Like when it comes to just AI in or anything general.
Yeah, I mean, like AI is one thing, but I guess my big premise there is like I think like there's a lot of copycats of each other now because GPT is still the foundation.
Sure.
So I think a lot of the products are the same, but that growth is going to be the thing that differentiates them, the users they can acquire. So AI is sort of my example there, but we see it as a cyclical cycle every couple of years where new
Yeah,
technology comes out like
look,
this.
like again, uh, I have not, I would say, built a company from scratch, which is, like maybe one day I'll do that. But what I can say from what I observe is, at the early stage when you're actually building something with literally like 0 to 1, kind of 0 users to 1 users, it's a different kind of skill set than, like, let's say a skill set a growth person at a growth stage company has, which is like me. uh, to me, like when I'm using some of those early stage products which has like absolutely no customers, I care less about like how did I discover you, how did I acquire you, like how did I get acquired. Sure, like you might have some like spikes in your growth strategies, which is like get feature on product hunt, or like use your own network to get your first 100 customers, like things which do not scale. Essentially that's what like YC says, like do things
Yeah.
which does not scale. To me, like those are decent enough growth strategies early on to just get your first like 10 even paying customers. And to me what's important here is, can you truly solve my problem? Like my thing with like a lot of these like a lot of early stage products is they tend to do a lot because they like a lot of product books talk about keep talking to your customers. Yes, you should talk to your customers, but you should also like try to see like how do you truly focus on them and like try to like weed out what is the right thing, or what are the things we should not care about. Like there's an amazing book, the mom test, like on
Hmm.
this topic about, like how do you talk to your customers well. So just talking gives no outcome. And I feel a lot of these are like a lot of early stage projects which I'm using uh, misses that point, and they don't end up solving the problem I have, but just try to address like 4 different customer personas and have everything half baked.
Right.
So, and I have done that mistake too. Like I have built like 3 or 4 like products from scratch. One of them succeeded. Every single time the ones which failed, we had the same problem where we just tried to do too much with too little. The only thing which succeeded was a product called checkbook.io, which I was building back in 2015 with a friend of mine. We succeeded because there was a crypto boom happening back then, and there are a bunch of crypto companies who were wanting to use our API for payments, and we're like, oh yeah, we'll build it for you. And that
Right.
gave us like automatic focus, where we're just saying, hey, crypto companies, we'll build the best possible ACH payment system for you, which is white labeled. And that's what we did, which gave us insane amounts of focus. So I think that focus on like that first 10 paying customers who obsess about you is what I would focus on. But in
Mhm.
terms of growth strategies, like how do you get those users? Man, it's hard. I can share some tactical things which I have seen which is working. Uh, like like I was featured once on Product Hunt. I built something on the side and I was on the top page. It is great. Like you get decent leads. I got about like 100 signups, like essentially leads, out of which
Mhm.
maybe 30 were sticky. They stuck to using my product, which is still awesome. Like if I'm getting 30 users who obsess about my product, that's crazy good.
Right.
um, Second thing which I've seen is if you're building a B2B product, um, uh, like yeah, it might not be the most popular thing to say, but like LinkedIn in mails, they work. Not, I wouldn't say your conversion is gonna be like 50% or 10%. It's going to be like 1 to 2% if you're doing all the things right.
That
But
can go a
like
long way.
LinkedIn connection requests, LinkedIn emails are a decent way to get some of those early users, especially if you're sending it, if you're not using a bunch of those like boilerplate automated tools, like you're genuinely being authentic in asking for i- requests there. um, so yeah, like the like some of these two are, and of course third is like just using your own network, like use
Yeah.
the people you know who actually care about solving that problem on their side, and just like try to make them use it and try to make them pay for it. So yeah, these are some of the things I've seen which is at least working recently.
That makes sense. Yeah, I think it's always interesting when when you think about growth at a bigger company, you always have all these KPIs and these roadmaps that you
Exactly.
set up, and the moment you come to the startup side, it's all guerrilla like marketing, like just
Oh
trying to
yeah.
find any way of getting any users. So it's
Oh
always
yeah.
very interesting dynamic.
Oh, totally. Like our growth measurement is like completely different than how I would do when I'm building like a like 0 to 1 product. Like yeah, like our growth measurement is all about like blended view of like how are we acquiring? Okay, segment them by customer type, segment them by channels. Very
Hmm.
different thing, but like you don't really have multiple channels at a startup.
Yeah,
Like
for sure.
even if one works, that's amazing. So
Yeah,
so yeah, going super deep into the weeds is, I think, what I would say, and what I tell to anyone, which is hard, especially in B2B. It's hard. Like I have not done a lot of consumer product. I but to me, consumer feels even harder. Like you don't even like one of my favorite people on consumer side is like Nikita Bier.
and
Like
Nikita Beer. Yeah,
oh my goodness, like I don't know how that guy does things. It's crazy. Like
he he's a guerrilla marketer too, though. He has a very always has some unique plan to get people on. It's very
yeah,
interesting.
and I feel like he has this like this unique understanding about a specific person's like teenagers persona, what's in their head, what kind of things they want, what kind of tools they use. It's like that just needs, I think, like yeah, like like building consumer products is like next level challenge, because you have to be like a psychologist like really understand human in masses very well. Yeah.
Yep. No, no, that makes a lot of sense. And yeah, I'm really excited to see which AI companies succeed, which ones die. It's very saturated space right now, so I think we're going to be see a lot of action there.
Yeah,
But
I advise some of them. I mean, I think my like just directional thing is like there are two kinds of companies which I'm bullish on. One is like the companies which are building the infra layer. Of course, when I say infra, at multiple levels, right?
mhm,
Standard stuff, which is like people who sell shovels have high likely to win at an early stage. So that's one. Second is like there are certain people. I just came across one person last week. I can't name them here, but like that company, the founders of the company has this like really deep understanding of the persona. They're like
right.
revenue ops, and they have this really deep understanding of like what the problems revenue apps teams have, and they have done that for like 10 years. So solving some of that very specific niche problem using the technology which is in front of them, because they're also engineers and technologists, is I think also a winning combination. I think not like Naval Ravikant once said that once, like in one of his blogs, which is like rather than like giving deep expertise into like one pillar, like gain expertise in like four areas and go like a level deep, not too deep. I
Right.
think that like that is what makes an entrepreneur successful. Just like like knowing two or three like disjointed areas well, and then
Mhm.
combine them together to make your product. So yeah, I think these are the two things in like maybe in this space which we might see successful over the next few years.
No, for sure. It makes a lot of sense. I think it's funny you're talking about the shovel thing. I think on a little bit tangential note, but I feel exactly the same with crypto right now, where I think there is some potential with the technology, but I think you need somebody who will actually take the technologies and put it in a way that actually uses them to have functionality that wasn't possible before. Until then, I think the infrastructure companies who are enabling people who can think like that
Yeah,
to build those products, those are the companies that will do well right now. So anyway, that's
I
my
hear you.
little
Yeah,
hot
yeah.
take on crypto.
No, yeah, crypto is the next level game. I think, yeah, it's yeah, a lot of my friends are, a couple of my friends are actually, yeah, still in like deep into crypto. And I mean, I'm an investor in crypto, sure, like many people out there. How deep I understand the space, I do not understand that as deep as like how can it grow. But like just looking at the kind of people who work in the space, I mean, I'm just bullish based on that. Like I know some really smart people who are still solving it in a meaningful way. That
Yeah,
gives me some hope that they probably know something what I do not. And of course, a lot of this is just like yes, it can have no value in few years, but it is one of those things which is like a long term game. Maybe we'll building a shovel now which might take longer. I mean, even with AI, like generative AI we are seeing now, like the things were being built like 8 years in, it's an 8 year in the making thing, and now is when we are seeing it's getting mainstream now because now we are able to realize its value. So it's the
right.
same thing with crypto, like maybe a few more years to go and we'll see how things happen there.
We'll see what happens, but I think one huge thing there is perception, right? And I know when you joined Upwork, for example, in 2017, Upwork had 14 million users, and by the time you left, it was reported that Upwork had around 23 million freelancers, which is a 70% increase. And I think, well, small freelancing gigs have always been commonplace, where you ask
Yeah,
somebody to build something for you, give them small money there. Bringing freelancers to big companies is sort of more of a newer concept, where companies typically want to go with employees rather than freelancers there. So I think it's a big shift in perception that's happened.
yeah.
And when you think about it from a growth point of view, like how did you guys go about shifting that perception and bringing on new users to the platform and growing it the way you guys did?
Yeah, it's look, like hiring in the US is, you know, um yeah, so complex. Like the like one of the things that like somebody said to me once was like the labor laws in the US are 100 years old, written for employees who were like like working. I mean, of course, it has improved over time by amendments, but like it's still like the foundations are fairly old and written for a very different world than a digital worker of today.
Hmm.
Uh, uh, there are of course companies which needs like your physical presence, but I think all companies are not the same anymore. All kinds of work is not the same anymore. Like you
Yeah.
can work on a computer, build $1 billion business out of nowhere. So hiring, at least the way Upwork focuses on, is like knowledge workers, like people who can open up the laptop and do amazing work. Not all companies are open to that, like, and this also feeds into like the remote work like idea. I mean, a lot of success, like OpenAI is a great example of like company which is like physically located in the San Francisco area, and as far as I know, they are not like that remote. Like they're like
Right.
all like in SF. So there are tech companies also which care deeply about being in person, right? So to me, like hiring is like fairly complex problem where one is the legal aspect, which is like how do you get legal happy with your hiring processes across the country, across outside the US. Like how do you make people safely hired outside the Americas. um, Second is more of a cultural, like how do you perceive remote people in your company as a culture. And
Right.
sometimes I think I've also seen um, like contractors are just perceived to be people who are not necessarily critical to your team. They are supposed to be given tasks which are like less important. They are supposed to not have skin in the game with you. I think
Yeah.
that's a perception problem. Not only perception problem, maybe the contractors also feel that way, that hey, like I'm going to get hired for something less important, but I'm just going to do my job. Like, well, how do they feel? So that was second thing I think at least I saw. I observed where our like at Upwork, like our customers are more like, yeah, I can hire contractors, sure, but I'm gonna allocate them to things which is non-critical to me. So that's like also a cultural thing. And the third thing was like just cross-border. Like how do you enable hiring, collaboration wa- by people which are outside the US? Now Upwork solves the legal problems very well there. Like if you want to hire internationally, you are taken care of. Legally, you're all clean. The part of the cross-border problem is time zones, which
Hmm.
I'm also not a huge fan of. Like my hiring guidance to my team has been, I would love to be within 3 hours plus minus to California. Anything
Yeah,
more than that is pain. Not like not just on me, but also your team members. So
totally.
but people have different flexibilities here. Some people do care a lot about working with the best people in the world, no matter what the time zone is, and that I think should be an option given to people. So but again, like to summarize, they're like these three kind of like issues which companies like Upwork, but not just Upwork, like every company in the talent space, there are so many who are focusing on helping you find the right talent, get them hired on our platform, are going through. um,
Hmm.
I mean, how we solved it, I mean, I wouldn't say we have fully solved it. Like the moment we solve it purely, I think Upwork is going to be like a 10x more valuable company than what it is right
Right.
now. But the way I think, at least the team at Upwork, which is like a phenomenal team, Hayden is like who's a CEO, like is just amazing. The way I think they would solve it is just one is this like this behavioral change, like which is slow and takes time. Like how do you influence companies to like think, okay, like we can hire people? And the second is, I think this is my hypothesis, which is as well millennials go into leadership roles at these like larger companies, they would be more open-minded about like, okay, this is not, well, okay, open is a wrong word there, but more about just a different way of working, which is
Yeah,
I don't care about like legal, let's push like legal to see like what can we do there more. And like they're more open maybe to hiring people outside the country, and even have a different perspective towards contractors. Maybe they're, from their perspective, they're like, yeah, they're just a team member. And there's
hmm,
a legal classification, so we'll make sure legally everything is kosher, but make sure like they can work on any problem they think they are, it's important for them. So I, like it's more of a perception problem which has to be addressed. Outside of that, you know like we have a pretty awesome enterprise team, like enterprise sales team at Upwork, and they focus heavily on these larger companies where there are pockets of teams which are like more open and want to be more nimble in hiring cross border. And so tactically that's what they focus on, like how can these larger companies identify champions and try to win.
right. That makes a lot of sense, and I think it comes back to one thing we talked about earlier, where your customer becomes your biggest advocate. So if you do it well
Exactly.
for certain enterprises, they see the benefit from it. Then a lot of other enterprises might copy, or on a more smaller level, right? Small medium businesses
Oh yeah,
who are
I mean,
looking for freelancers.
oh yeah, I think any of these B2B companies, I think it's not a lot of like, well, it is a common idea, but it's not that common in terms of public knowledge, which is how important these champions are to get the sales done, to get the ongoing relationship expanded further in the company. Champions are extremely important. Like, and have seen like the moment champions leave, sometimes relationships just shut down completely, or at least don't grow that much. So yeah, champions are like extremely important for a B2B to grow well.
For sure, and that's internal and external champions. So it's a whole. It's like you have to play on both sides. So
Exactly.
especially when you're a marketplace.
Exactly.
But perfect. Thank you so much, Utkarsh, for coming on the podcast. I had a great time talking about growth and Webflow and just all that great stuff. Before I let you go, I have two last questions for you. The first one being, is there a book that you recommend us checking out?
Oh, uh, so many. like right now, I'm into audiobooks. I'm re-listening, if you will, to the Bhagavad Gita, which is interesting. Like, I'm not
Hmm.
very like not a very religious person, but it just somehow got into it. It's an interesting book, but like more for like for your audience, maybe I one of my favorite books of all time would be The Creative Selection by Ken Koshienda. It's like it just gives you a glimpse into how maybe they still do, I don't know, but how Apple operated back in the time of like Steve Jobs, and like how they built the iPhone, the Safari browser. It's amazing. It's an inspiration to me, especially as a growth person. It feels very
Yeah,
anti-growth kind of work, but that's what is interesting to me. It's like how can you ship amazing high quality things at high velocity, um, with some intuition and customer understanding. So yeah, it's a pretty solid book there.
Makes sense. Yeah, I actually didn't know Ken Koshinada had a book. I followed him on Twitter, but I would go check that out for sure
Go
because
for it. It's
I'm
amazing.
a big fan of the work Apple's done. They're huge inspirations of work I do as well. So that makes a lot of sense. And yeah, the Bhagavad Gita, I think I've given it a couple of tries. Unfortunately, I've let it go after one or two chapters, but I know one day I'm actually gonna sit down and properly
I
give it a
would
go.
I would recommend read the book by Eknath Ishwaran. He's the guy. So he actually has amazingly simplified the book for, I would say, the Western audience.
Okay.
So like yeah, like reading the raw form is pretty hard.
Yeah, it gets a little bit complex and it gets a little abstract too. So
Yeah,
you just like
yeah,
so it can give challenges. But last question I have is just like what are the next steps for you in Webflow? What can we look forward to?
Oh, the most exciting thing for me is like the WebFlow conference coming up in a couple of weeks. So we are extremely excited about it. A lot of amazing things happening. I was just looking at the lineup and I was like, really, we're doing so much just in like 2 days of announcements. So I am really excited about that. A lot of cool things happening there. And then the next year, I think our ecosystem, that's one of the pillars I lead, our ecosystem pillar, and like the thing which excites me the most for next year is how do we grow our like long tail use cases which our customers have just hacked around. So yeah,
Mhm.
that's really one of the two biggest things I'm looking forward to at Webflow.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm looking forward to those as well. So, but yeah, thank you so much everyone for tuning in. Thank you once again, Utkarsh, for coming onto the podcast. Until next one, take care everyone, and I hope you're having a great day.
Thank you. See ya.
A lot of people have been asking me what I use to do my podcast, and I'm happy to say that I use Zencaster. Zencaster is awesome because it's an all-in-one platform that allows you to have all the tools that you need from distribution to recording all in one platform. And so whether you want to record on the platform or you want to distribute to Apple Music and Spotify, you can do that all through Zencaster. It's also really easy to record a podcast with Zencaster because it's available on the browser. And the best thing about it is you actually get studio audio quality from those recordings, because Zencaster records the audio into the browser and then uploads it to the cloud. So you don't have to necessarily worry about your mic not being as good as you see in some video calls online. So if you want to get started with Zencaster today, feel free to go to zencaster.com/pricing and use my offer code DAVIDG for 30% off your first paid month. I'm really excited to see all the stories you guys share using Zencaster.